Hello everybody, and welcome to Lesson 10, where we explore Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal. So you may remember Franklin Delano Roosevelt from 2 units ago, Unit 4, where we explored Roosevelt's response to the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and the ultimate U.S. entry into World War II. So that was looking at Franklin Roosevelt's foreign policy, views on foreign policy. Here, we're going to be looking at some of Roosevelt's plans for the economy as he campaigned for president during the economic crisis known as the Great Depression. The Great Depression was a serious economic crisis that followed the stock market crash of 1929. So this is coming on the coattails of the Gilded Age and the Roaring '20s. Times were good. Economic times were good. A lot of wealth was being created. Now, not good for everybody, right? We know that in many cases, the working class was being exploited. Working conditions were bad. But in general, the late 19th, early 20th century was a time of immense wealth creation. We were seeing the emergence of a middle class. And there was a lot of investment in the stock market. And when the stock market began going down in 1929, it caused a panic and a massive sell-off of stocks. And that quickly impacted banks, as people had been borrowing money to buy stocks. Banks had been buying stocks using deposited funds from people who had accounts at those banks. And ultimately, it just spiraled out of control and turned into one of the worst, if not the worst, economic crisis the world has ever seen, at least in recent history. Banks closed, businesses closed, millions of people lost their jobs. And you had situations like this, right? Soup lines, bread lines, where people were out of work and waiting in line to get food. This is just an iconic Dorothy Lang photograph from the era of a poor mother and her children, clearly showing the suffering that people were going through during the Depression. So by 1932, 20% of the U.S. population was unemployed, right? 20% of the U.S. population did not have work, and over half were living in poverty. So times were not good. So enter Franklin Roosevelt. As we know, Franklin Roosevelt was president from 1933 to 1945. The document we're going to be looking at is part of a Roosevelt campaign speech from 1932 when he was running for president. And it was during that campaign that he outlined his plan, which was known as the New Deal. And this was Roosevelt's plan to lift the U.S. out of the Great Depression. This program, the New Deal, was largely a massive economic stimulus program, meaning it was going to involve the government spending massive amounts of money to ultimately get people back to work, get money in people's pockets so they would be able to go out again and purchase products from businesses and ultimately slowly lift the U.S. out of this economic crisis. So there were many programs put in place to serve as a safety net for people so that if the economy does tank, people aren't thrown into destitute poverty. So programs like unemployment insurance guaranteed you income if you lost your job. Programs like Social Security guaranteed you income in old age, an old age pension. So you pay taxes, right? You pay into Social Security your entire working life, and that then guarantees you income once you retire in old age. Roosevelt also initiated or spoke of initiating and ultimately did massive public works programs, building projects all over the country to put people to work. The biggest program towards this end was the Works Project Administration, or the WPA. And the WPA employed millions of job seekers as they carried out projects all over the country, some big, some small. Big projects including things like the Hoover Dam in Nevada, LaGuardia Airport in New York City, right? These are massive public works projects, but there were also lots of small projects, just like small cabins or lodges or shelters in national and state parks, or murals. There are WPA murals all over the place, all over the country, and this one is an example of a mural that was painted at a local post office. So to learn about and to dig deeper into Roosevelt and his thoughts on how the government should respond to the economic crisis of the Great Depression, we're going to be reading an excerpt from a campaign speech that Franklin Roosevelt gave in 1932. And in this speech, he's going to be talking about, again, what he sees as the role of government. And it's interesting, being it's a political speech, he does talk about his belief in small government, his belief that government costs too much. But at the same time, he's emphasizing that in this situation, these extenuating circumstances of the Great Depression, the government needs to step in and play a very prominent role to resolve this economic crisis. So he's going to talk about a few things in the speech, and one of the things is reforestation. So the Great Depression coincided with an environmental disaster known as the Dust Bowl. Now the Dust Bowl was the result of years and years and years of farming techniques, non-modern, outdated farming techniques that really depleted the soil of its nutrition and its health. And that, combined with a massive drought, turned much of the Midwest farmland into just wasteland, useless farmland, dust that just blew away in the wind. So not only do you have this economic crisis resulting from a stock market crash and a banking crisis, you also have an environmental crisis that's leading to the collapse of the entire agricultural industry in the U.S. So part of the document is going to be Roosevelt outlining a plan of how he's going to put people to work, reforesting a lot of this farmland, this depleted farmland that will hopefully, reinvigorate the soil and also put people to work. So if you're wondering what that's all about, there it is. So I hope you enjoy the document. Look forward to talking with you about it in class.